Community and Art Centre, the large 23-room establishment that was built by, it's got historical links, it was built by Percy Shelley and another fella, and given to the people for the education of the poor. And in recent times it's been closed rather cynically and left for 5 years uninhabited, but it's still in very good condition, and they're going to knock down most of it. I think the only thing they're going to leave is the thing they have to leave, which is a listed part of the building, and so I think 3 rooms are going to be left, and they're going to put 10 small 2-bedroom houses on the site. So understandably that's caused a lot of ruction in the area, and there's a lot of people who are very upset by that, because they've obviously, people who've lived around here have direct experience using the facility for arts, but before that it was the first example of theatre in education. It was the children's theatre, and before that it was the Boscombe School, so from 1900 onwards. So there's a lot of people with a lot of good memories of the place, and a lot of good vibes happening there.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Harry. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little about your bar, because I understand that you've won several awards this year. Yeah, we won the Best Bar Non-National Prize, which was a Best Practice Prize, but we won it largely for the role we play in the community. I think it's become a big issue in recent times that a lot of community pubs are being lost, and I think it was a nod in recognition of that probably us as an independent community pub in a difficult area, and to actually get to that level of best practice was timely. But I went up to London, went to the House of Lords to get the prize, and something interesting they said was the Lord Reddersdale, who gave us the prize, said, summing up the situation, he said, because we obviously lose in these pubs, he said, do we really want to live in a society where everybody sits at home drinking Tesco's wine, playing Xbox? And that's kind of what's happening to society, where we're being sectioned off into little boxes, and we're not being social at all. And in fact, I think the rise of social media and Facebook and Twitter and things like that is a sign of how unsociable we're being, because we're replacing what is direct contact with a virtual contact with each other. So we're spending a lot of time on Facebook and Twitter. These things are expanding rapidly, but we're losing important spaces like community spaces and community centres all across the country, where people can actually react for real, and our children can learn how to interact with their peer groups and other peer groups, and find a real place in society, instead of being some kind of factory machine or box, with constrained thinking, So I think we're at a tipping point in society. We need to really decide, what do we want for the future. Brilliant, thank you, Harry. And of course, this is where Darkcity Radio helps, by bringing some of our shows out into the community to find out exactly what they're thinking. Do you have anything that you'd like to add at the end here, Harry? Well, I'd just like to see this community centre saved, and I think there's been a tremendous response from people in the area. I think it's been great. Just this process has been great for community spirit, and that's the way I see community being the coming together as one, unity being one. So coming together as one, and that is what's happening, and it's really refreshing to see. Brilliant. Thanks, Harry. Next up, we're going to have lovely Lisa, who's going to talk a bit about the history of the Art Centre. Perhaps we could have a little jingle before we get there. Well, welcome back, people. We've now got the lovely Lisa sat next to me, who is an expert on the history of Boscombe, because it does have quite a lot of history. And she's going to talk to us about how all the buildings for the BCCA originated and what their intention was. Over to Lisa.
Hi, Bob. The BCCA building originally was 2 classrooms, but in 1878. And that was part of the Boscombe, it was part of the British and Foreign School movement. So it was originally called the Boscombe British School. It followed a model which was non-conformist, in that it had it was a Christian education, but It wasn't affiliated to any particular church, and certainly not to the Church of England. It was quite sort of groundbreaking at the time, and the idea was to provide a decent education for working class kids, whereas they probably wouldn't have had that otherwise. So you had the two original school classrooms then in 1878, and that was actually launched by Percy Florence Shelley, who was the son of the poet Shelley and of Mary Shelley of Frankenstein fame, along with Frederick Moser, who was a local philanthropist. And after a few years, more people moved to the area, so the school had to expand. And so they added many more school rooms. And in 1903, the school was pretty much finished. So that is the BCCA that we have now. There are some additional outside buildings which were built, I believe, around 1940s, 1950s. But the main building was finished in 1903. Actually, Shelley himself bequeathed the original Boscombe British School to then Bournemouth Corporation, which became Bournemouth Council. It was supposed to be a place of learning, education for the working and labouring classes of Boscombe forever. When it was bequeathed in 1905, it became the Boscombe Council School. It was a general state primary school, and it stayed that way until the early 1960s. And then it became the Boscombe Children's Theatre and the Drama Centre. And this was, again, a really cutting-edge place, because it seemed to be, to us, the first theatre and education venue in the country. And it was just, fantastic for all of the thousands of kids in the area. So they could actually go along, and when it first launched, they did a lot of, big classical pieces and Shakespeare and all kinds of things that the kids of the area at the time wouldn't otherwise have been exposed to. But it was just a fantastic education for them. Then from that, it became the BCCA, which was originally called the Bournemouth Centre for Community Arts, and again was a theatre and education establishment. And I myself went there from the age of sort of 10 till 19. And it's just the most amazing building. There's over 20 rooms there. There's a studio theatre which is suitable for disabled people because there's no raised stage. And the adjoining facilities are just unique. There's nothing else like it, certainly in the area, and not for many, many miles around. And, I think it's crazy, really, that we should be losing that facility when it could provide such potential benefit for so many people in this area.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. You briefly touched on the covenants that were put into the deeds, certainly the deeds of transfer. It's very difficult to understand how somebody like our council, who are supposed to be our public servants, can ignore these sort of directives. Perhaps you could talk a bit about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I can't claim to know much about the legal aspect of that, but certainly just looking at what the original document said, it was supposed to be left as a place of learning for the working and labouring classes of Boscombe forever. And that's not just the original two classrooms. When that covenant was made, that was at the point that it was handed over to Bournemouth Corporation, and that was after the rest of the buildings had actually been built and been put in place. It wasn't just the two original classrooms. It was the entire school and the surrounding land. And I personally believe that should be there for all of our people, our community, not just the young people, but adults as well. There's so much that we could benefit from that nowadays, and it just seems ludicrous and frankly criminal that our council could totally disregard that. I mean, we do have heritage in this area, but the heritage that we do have seems to be being ignored by our council. Really, I think as far as our heritage and tourism goes, that we really should be bigging up our connections to the Shelley family, who really did it so much to try and leave things for, leave facilities and land for the people of this area, way beyond their demise. They wanted this to be used by the people of the area forever. I just think it's crazy. I don't understand myself the legal implications of these covenants, but surely they were put in place for some reason, and the people that made these covenants would have thought that they would be upheld. Now we are in the most deprived area in the southwest of England, apparently, in central Boscombe. So we need these facilities even more than ever to bring our community together and to give people, things to do, things to learn, and ways of actually connecting with each other. And it just seems that we're becoming more and more of a fragmented society. And we actually have this fantastic facility that's there. Why is it not being used now? It just seems crazy to me.
Well, I suspect that Shelley specifically put in the covenants in all the documents relating to the building to specifically stop this type of thing that the council's doing, assuming ownership and then destroying it for their own personal gain. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lisa. That's given us a much better grounding into how the building is. Well, I now have Katherine sat next to me, who's one of the friends of the BCCA, and she would like to tell us a little bit about how the building is now and how the community view it and want it back. So I'll just hand you over to Katherine.
Hi, Bob. Currently, the BCCA Friends, they requested that this amazing, beautiful Victorian building be listed as an asset of community value through the new localism bill. And unfortunately, that's been denied. Bournemouth councillors stating that it's been closed too long, that 2 years is the maximum it should be closed. And really, this is the only reason it's closed is because they won't allow it to be used for private hire. For 130 years, it's been a vital community asset. It's served Boscombe very well as a place of learning, creativity, and well-being. And I think the Shelleys would really be just turning over in their graves if they realized what was happening now. But it's a vital community asset, and we requested that it be listed as such, and that has been denied. And everywhere else in the country, there's sort of a 5-year rule, but there aren't any actual defined time limits for things to be listed. And we think a 2-year limit is just absolutely ridiculous when the whole community is very actively protested first its closure, and then the fact it's been sitting there empty when we've had several declarations of interest that would make it a self-sustaining venture. And we've given the council a big society social enterprise plan to reinstate it, and that's been ignored. It won't cost them a penny. There's no reason that this centre should be closed. As several of my colleagues have said, it's an actual criminal thing to keep such a valuable community asset from the most deprived in the entire southwest of England.
I also understand that the Friends put together a business plan that outlined all the types of funding and the various different skills and enterprises that would be involved with the community centre. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was very simple, really. As soon as the centre was closed, it was closed by taking away the use of private hire, which had made it self-sustaining. So that way it looked unsustainable on paper only. It was very cynically closed. They did a consultation after the closure. The overwhelming majority of responses to this consultation was the fact that they wanted it to stay open and for community use. It's the heart of our community, and not only that, but it provides inspiration and hope to literally the most deprived.
I also have heard that as a replacement, supposedly, for this art centre, the council have decided that various dispersed venues around the area could cope with all the various different artists, exhibitions, music, creative theatre, pottery. How would you answer that?
Well, we've done very extensive research into what's available, and unfortunately, they've cited places such as a healthcare center, and this place right here, Chaplin's Bar, is available for arts events. And what they seem to miss is that artists need dedicated workshop space and equipment, and that just does not exist in Boscombe. We desperately need this center open. We've proven need, we've proven sustainability, and the sooner it's reopened, the better, really. I mean, it's been 5 years closed, and in that 5-year time, Boscombe has gone from the 2 to 3% in the top for being deprived to being the most deprived. That's after 5 years of closure, and I think that says it all, really.
Yeah, it makes pretty grim listening, really.
Yeah, it does, and at the moment their only options are to retain 3 rooms, which are unsustainable. They have no business plan. 2 weeks ago, Council Officer Chris Morgan said to a Boscombe community interest company that appears to be steered by our local council that they hadn't done a consultation or feasibility report yet. Wouldn't you do that before you knock down a vital arts centre, not after?
Well, this is true. You'd think that's the way that the cookie would crumble. The local community obviously are up in arms about this, and several actions have been taken. Perhaps you could describe them for us.
Well, as soon as the centre was closed, there was a petition of over 600 gathered by a local disabled theatre group to keep the centre open, because this centre is very unique in the fact that it's completely disabled accessible. And as Lisa McQuillan has said, it has a very unique theatre, and the Theatres Trust completely supports the reopening of this centre. They've sent a very supportive letter. It's ideal for children, for disabled people, because there's no actual stage, so it's very safe. Theatre is performed in the round, and in fact, it was where theatre and education was founded in the early 1960s. The BCCA has always been the very cutting edge of education, always, and now it has the opportunity to be cutting edge for big society and localism, and that's being denied.
Well, once again, it appears that there is a council here that really doesn't listen. When we come back after a bit of music, there was one particular action that the community took, and we will be talking about that. We're now going to talk about the various different actions that the community have taken, and they get obviously more severe as the council's ears clearly seem to get more plugged. I'll just hand you back to Katherine, who will be able to talk about the first few, and then we'll broaden it out to other actions that the community has taken.
Well, after the petition, which was ignored, that was accompanied by deputations by representatives from TOPS and DAPCO, which are disabled theatre companies, the centre was closed. And as I said, after the closure, the council did a consultation. That was ignored. Then notice of demolition came to local residents, and that resulted in a protest march against the demolition and the successful listing of part of the building, the original 2 schoolrooms, by English Heritage. That saved it from becoming a temporary car park, which was the council's original plan. After spending over £80,000 on refurbishing the site, it's been maintained for preservation. Their then plan was to spend £180,000 knocking it down for a temporary car park, even though there's plenty of parking close by. There was no need for a car park. After that, local residents put together the self-funded business plan. That was actually accepted by the council until they announced that they had just won £2.3 million from the Department of Children, Schools and Families. The only thing they failed to mention was that they had some misleading inaccuracies on their application for the funding. Instead of saying that they were going to knock down a historic community and arts center to build their office block, they said it was for a different site altogether, for an unused car park in a different part of Boscombe. And they lost that funding, but mostly they lost that funding because they refused to involve the community. It was dependent on community involvement. After that, then their next plan was to build these 9 homes they're knocking down 2 homes to build 11. There are 2 unused flats on the site that have been empty for over 3 years now, which is a bit criminal considering how many people need housing in the area. But, you know, you're talking about a vital asset which will provide a much wider benefit than 9 homes. And it's been much opposition. After their plan to build their office block was foiled, there was over 1,000 objections to build 9 homes, and they've ignored loss of amenities during this planning hearing as well. So there's a lot of questions to be asked, really. Why is this happening when there's been so much opposition? They've been given a self-funded, non-profit, big society, social enterprise plan to reinstate this vital asset, and it's been ignored. And recently, after that was denied, the center is sat empty. It's just criminal that this center is sitting empty when it is just so desperately needed. A year ago in February, one of our local councillors reported that the building would be rubble in a matter of weeks, to which point we put this on our Facebook page, which now has over 3,700 members supporting it. And within 24 hours, it was occupied by people that we had never met before. They announced their arrival on Facebook. We went to the site, and I was greeted by 2 lovely young men who were actually cleaning it up because it's been left to wreck and ruin by the council. It's very overgrown vegetation. It was completely cleaned up. And the first thing I said to a woman who was walking by was, "Look, we've got it back." And she was actually a council employee. She went running over to me and she said, "Don't ever let it go."
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we're lucky enough to have with us now one of the individuals concerned in the community action to take back the community centre for the community. I'd just like to welcome Theo.
Hello, Bob. You can use my name as Chris if you wish. You don't have to call me Theo. But you were in there with me as well yourself. Great time, didn't we?
Well, this is true, yeah. It really was a community action. We were so annoyed when we heard councillors bragging that they were just going to turn it to rubble. And at that point, there hadn't been any planning for anything. It was just, wanton destruction, really. Perhaps, Chris, you'd like to go through a little bit about how we got in, because that was quite magic.
Yeah, we found an open window, and I was one of the first ones through this open window. And I don't normally do this kind of thing, but I felt so obliged. It's like we're losing a community asset, and it's my community. I chose to come and live here, and I'm not going to let it happen. So me and a few other people from Occupy went in as a direct action group and silenced the alarms and opened the doors. Had a cold night in there the first night with no heaters and bedding down on sleeping bags, but then by the next day we had all hands on deck. And smiles everywhere, and the community coming in. We opened it up to the community. And because Boscombe is absolutely teeming with artists and musicians and people of that they all flocked there and did their stuff there, and their stuff improved while they were there. I would definitely say there's a power, there's an energy in that building that it's a creative energy, and we soaked it all up, and we miss it. We miss it bad. We want to be back in there. I speak to everyone who I was in there with, and we just want it open for the community.
I think one of the biggest shocks was what we found when we did enter the building, the absolute state the council had left it in, having ripped out all the plumbing and heating. I mean, obviously they didn't take the waste pipes away, but virtually all the water pipes were disconnected, sawn in half, lots of pipe work taken out, and all the heating system totally removed. Perhaps you'd like to describe some of the other measures that the council took in order to ensure the destruction of this building.
Well, as I was the first one to inspect the building going round, and I don't know whether I've never seen anything like it before in my life, and I don't know whether it's a trick from like demolition companies use, but they'd braced out all the doorways to try and stretch them out to damage the building, and you could see the cracks forming. And that was done on like 6 or 7 doorways. So they got removed straight away and the evidence recorded. And then about a week into the occupation, we had a heavy rainstorm, and we ended up with a puddle about 4 inches deep outside the kitchen area that we were trying to mop up and wouldn't stop. So we sent some guys up on the roof, and they found that someone had peeled all the lead back on the roof. Didn't steal it; it was still there, but they peeled it back to let water ingress into the fabric of the building to slowly destroy it. And I presume this is a trick that building owners use to degrade their building quicker than Mother Nature would have it, to get their final outcome a little quicker.
And also on the outside, we found lots of buddleia type planting, but specifically next to the foundations. And this, of course, disrupts foundations. It gets into all the plumbing and will bring a building down ultimately. We spent lots and lots of time clearing up. We cleared it room by room by room. Perhaps you can describe a bit about some of the facilities that then developed with some of the things that we found that were just discarded and thrown into rubbish piles by the council.
We found a lot of people's artwork from when the place was open, and it was literally discarded in rubbish bins and in corners and not looked after at all. And we decided to look after this artwork and put on an art show. Another occupier, a girl called Kat, lovely girl, she's an artist. She put on an art show with it all the artwork that we found, and opened it up to the public for the day for an art show. And it just so happened the creators of this artwork attended, and we saw tears in people's eyes when they saw their old artwork from when they were kids there. It was quite an emotional time for us all, really.
Once we'd opened up that little gallery, we kept going further and further into the building, cleaning, sweeping, and ultimately we got to where the theatre was. Perhaps you can describe some of the things that happened in there once we cleaned all that out.
Yeah, we invited, we put the word out to the local community, come and use the space. And we got an application from the Born Drummers, who are African djembe troupe, and we invited them in to use it because they said it would save them money on their current venue, so they could use it while we were occupying. And they made some noise, didn't they? They made some hellish noise. It was fantastic. The Born Drummers, and it resonated the whole building. And in the theatre as well, we put on we made a stage out of some pallets we found, and the artist decorated it, and it was like all hands on deck. And we had studio engineers occupying as well, and electricians. We had all the trades there really to facilitate a lot of artwork and a lot of theatre.
We also found lots of more classroom type areas at that end of the building as well, which again we swept out, cleaned up, and we got several other groups interested in coming in as well.
It was a year ago.
Well, we had a yoga group came in, and several groups of musicians who came and recorded various different songs, and we had poets come in, and
we set up a band room, and we had band practice in there every night, people bringing their instruments in. Obviously, a lot of people play electric guitars and drums, and they're not welcome to play them at their own homes because obviously the noise for the neighbours. So it was a great place for them to come and beat the hell out of their drums for the evening and not disturb anyone, really. We certainly put the place to a lot of use. Every room, if it wasn't being used for sleeping rooms or dining rooms, it was being used for art, theatre, music. It was fantastic, really.
We also had other groups come in, like Women for Peace, and they came and held one of their sessions in there. But generally, the building just felt like it had a breath of fresh air blown through it, and having so many of the various different community groups come in and use it, it really felt like it was back to how it should be.
Yeah. I'm going back to the the feeling of the place and the power and the energy there, I got a feeling that there was a big energy there. So I got in contact with the Dorset Ghost Investigators, and they are quite big on YouTube. Anyone look them up? They get a lot of hits of Dorset Ghost Investigators, and they actually came down the next night and did a ghost investigation in the art centre itself. And they got some quite interesting footage, and it's all up online. It's the Dorset Ghost Investigators investigate the BCCA. Just search for that, and it's had like 65,000 views. It's given us great publicity for the place, and they heard voices and they felt things, and they had a dog with them as well. That was my own dog actually, that was helping them with the investigation. Yeah, and that proved really popular, and it was quite amazing, and it sort of answered a lot of questions for us about the energy that was present there.
Well, now perhaps we can get on to the legal side. I mean, obviously the council were definitely not very happy with us being in there. We could almost feel the temperature at the town hall from where we were. We ended up having to go to the court. The council fast-tracked it, of course, and we were in there, I think, within 2 weeks of actually occupying. Can you remember how that turned out?
I think there was some complication, wasn't there, with paperwork, and the judge adjourned it for 12 weeks. So we were absolutely elated when we got outside and realised we had another 12 weeks of opportunity for creativeness in there as occupiers.
Well,
when we went to court, the council couldn't actually prove ownership, which extended our stay to, I think we had we had 4 full art galleries after 2 months of occupation, which was amazing. It was the most amazing community arts happening ever. Just the energy in that building was just alive, and it just reinforced. The community was so supportive. I remember when it was first occupied and the police arrived, and several of my neighbors who were quite elderly came out to see what was happening. And the police said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll have them out of there soon." And this one old dear said, "But you don't understand, we're delighted they're here to save the building."
Yeah, it was quite interesting, that first court appearance, because all the court staff, they were actually supporting what we were doing, interestingly, and coming up and saying, we support you. And
we were even welcomed in by the security guards. They knew all about what we were doing, and smiles all around with the security guards. They couldn't have been nicer chaps. Whereas, I mean, that's a lot different from what has gone on, like in some of the free man movements. And there's, you get tussles with the security guards. It was none of that this time. It was all really nice. Yeah, the only people that were against us were the council. Yeah.
I mean, it's also quite interesting that the council were going to use the Occupy LSX judgment against us. In other words, that you have a right to voice your protest, but you don't have a right to be in a building to do it. Obviously, the judge got shown this, and after a bit of toing and froing with the questioning, I believe it was him who actually asked the council whether they could prove they got ownership. And in fact, they couldn't. They hadn't got the documents, and he then adjourned the case, which of course gave us much more time to be able to invite people into the building. But interestingly, it transpired that the council, although they were gifted the building from Dorset County Council, and I believe that was in 1993 or 97, they failed to register it with the land registry, and in fact only registered it 2 or 3 weeks after that initial court appearance. So, our local council, they kind of bend the rules to suit themselves, it seems. Anyway, we were lucky enough to keep it open for quite a number of weeks. We had to go back to court, and obviously the council could prove they owned it, and the judge clearly issued an eviction order, which was quite right, really. But we really achieved our objectives, which was to let people know that the building was there, because when it's shut for 5 years, I guess it disappears from people's front of their minds. and for people to come in and see what's there, because a large number of people, when it was adult ed, obviously didn't get to go in to see, and a lot of people had moved in and out of the area, but a number of those that had moved in had no idea what facilities we had. I mean, perhaps both of you could give me some of the reactions that people gave you.
Well, people were absolutely astounded that such an amazing asset was just sitting on our doorstep. You know, it's directly across from the precinct, our major shopping and bus links. It's close to the seafront. We desperately need a wet weather facility in this area. There is nothing. And as I said, since its closure, we've actually become the most deprived. You know, and I think that it really does say it all. It's learning, creativity, and well-being for all. The community response was amazing. People donated, you know, bedding and food and blankets, and they were delighted to finally see the center open. As I said, the council employee herself said, "Don't let them take it. Don't ever let them get it back. You know, this belongs to the community. The community are aware." And one very interesting thing that came out during the court case is we were constantly told about the covenants placed on this site. And my colleagues and I, we actually requested these covenants through the Freedom of Information Act years ago. But it was only until the court case that the judge said, you know, "I will make sure that you receive those documents." And when we did receive them, it says clearly to be used as a place of learning for the poor, the deprived, the working and manufacturing class, children and adults of Boscombe forever. And they obviously aren't capable of being trustees because their only option has been demolition. They haven't put it out to tender. They've ignored locality. They've ignored big society. And there's a lot of questions to be asked.
Any recollections that you have, Chris?
Well, I did a lot of filming of people's reactions. I'm putting it on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is See the Free Man, the letter C and the Free Man. And we've got a lot of the footage stored on there. But we had hundreds of people saying "Save our art," didn't we, on that video? Yeah, that was pretty good. It's just all from the heart, really. Everyone coming in, and they almost had tears in their eyes, knowing what could happen to the place. But we're trying to reassure them all along that no, we won't let it happen. It will not come to this. But it's going to take us to keep doing this to make that happen. We can't just sit on our asses. But yeah, as long as we keep up with this, we are confident that the council can't touch it. It will be a media nightmare for them. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that whilst we were in the building, we did get a surveyor, somebody who's professionally a surveyor, come in to have a look at it. And although he didn't give a professional opinion of the structure, he did give us his personal opinion. Perhaps you could describe what he felt was the issues with the building.
Well, he basically said it's worth keeping more than it's worth knocking down. He said it was a heating system that needed putting in because they'd ripped all the old pipework out because it was wrapped in asbestos. But it wasn't as though the asbestos could have come in contact with anyone. It was buried under the floor. They had to dig the floor up to remove the asbestos that was hidden under the concrete of the floor. So it was. We believe it was just that they were profiteering on the demolition, and they'd already got a demolition guy sorted out, and he's making money before he needs to, and helping the building fall down. But
well, I did get a look at the asbestos report that was made for the council, and in fact it said that once the little that was around the pipes was removed, there was none other apart from in the floor glue bonding, which is inert, I understand.
They had an asbestos roof on it, and so that was their claim for it not to be safe. And they were actually advising the general public through the local newspaper that they seem to have a hand in as well, not to go in because it was dangerous because of asbestos. And well, the building we were occupying wasn't the building that they were talking about. It was one of the outhouses. So you can see how sneaky the council try and be, but it's just they have to work on lies to get their point across.
We actually have a copy of the council's own estimates as to how much it will cost for refurbishments of the BCCA, and that amounts to £72,000, which really is an absolute pittance when you consider that this will benefit over 20,000 people and bring a desperately needed arts, heritage and tourism facility to the most deprived.
As well. I mean, we do need community facilities in Boscombe. There's a big drug rehabilitation scheme in Boscombe, and we got the most expensive ones in the country. We got the Providence projects, and they are good at it, and they get people clean. But unfortunately, once these people are clean, they've got nothing to do with their time, and they end up back on the addictive substances again. Instead of having somewhere to go and even have something different to do, learn a new skill without having to pay for it, without having to book up. They could be, they could be honing their musical skills or learning how to get involved with filmmaking or drama. Instead, they're out on the streets, they're bored, and they're looking for their dealer again. And then before you know it, they're back in the rehab centres, and then the cycle goes on and on and on. And this is what Boston's been like for so many years. And we need to do something different for once.
I also understand that there's more rehabs in Boscombe, which is a tiny community, than there is in the whole of London put together.
It's a big industry, the rehab in Boscombe, a very big industry, and along with the poverty, and I'm sure the council don't want to let that go, and they don't want people recovering. They bring people from all over the country to rehab here because obviously it's by the seaside and it's appealing, but we need it to work.
And there's money for the council, of course.
Yes, of course. I mean, at the moment, as long as Boscombe is the most deprived, the funding rolls in, and residents aren't seeing where it's being spent. Since the closure, in the past few years, over £25 million has been thrown at Boscombe. And since then, as I said, we've gone from the top 2 to 3% to number 1 in the entire Southwest. Where is that money going? I don't really think it behooves a lot of people, including the council, to actually do something proactive about real regeneration in Boscombe. As long as we're their cash cow, I don't think that, they say one thing and do another. All of their recommendations say, keep this center open, and yet they're knocking it down. And they've received over 1,000 objections to these homes. They've received 5 years of objections and active protest against this closure. Why is it closed? And we just aren't receiving any satisfactory answers.
Our local council does spend money in the area, though, doesn't it? I mean, haven't they created various follies? Perhaps, Katherine, you could tell us about one of the most laughable ones.
Oh, yes, the surf reef. And then, that's taken up over, I think, about £4 million so far. And at the moment, it's non-operational. Europe's first non-operational surf reef, artificial surf reef. And Boscombe's got an amazing surf naturally on its own by the pier. It wasn't really necessary, but you've got the north-south divide in Boscombe. You've got the top 20% of wealth living at the seafront, and yet you go to the other side of the tracks and you've got the most deprived area in the entire southwest of England. And, it's completely unnecessary. And I think Boscombe residents have really had enough of this poverty industry.
Well, I hope that's given everyone out there a little bit of an insight into how our community has feelings for our art centre, and some about what we've done about trying to secure its future. I mean, obviously this story hasn't finished by a long chalk, because I certainly can't hear the fat lady singing yet.